Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi. If you are just tuning in, feel free to use the chat function to let us know where you are listening in from tonight. All right. Got someone from Wallingford, San Diego. Hi, welcome. Minneapolis. Hi. Hello from Seattle. Hello from Renton Highlands. Hi. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Meghna. I am a staff member here at Book Larder, a cookbook shop here in Seattle, and we're so excited to have you all with us tonight. Tonight's event is surrounding this great new book, Instant Family Meals, written by Sarah Copeland, who we will be speaking to tonight. Sarah will be in conversation with Aran Goyoaga, who's also a local cookbook author. We are going to start out the evening with a conversation between the both of them. Feel free to use the chat function to talk to each other, and also use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout the presentation. We'll leave a little bit of room at the end to field more questions and do a more in-depth Q&A with Sarah, and we'll go from there. The book is available on our website, booklarder.com. So if after the presentation you say, I gotta have this book, you can head over to our website, and we do nationwide shipping as well as in-store pickup. We are open for appointments if you are looking to buy any holiday gifts last minute. We're open 11 to 4 Monday through Saturday and 12 to 4 on Sundays. So definitely feel free to make some appointments and we'll get you taken care of. That's all I have for you tonight. We're so excited to host both Sarah and Aran tonight in conversation surrounding instant family meals. We hope you enjoy the presentation, and I would love to welcome Sarah and Aran back on camera.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello. Good evening. It's bedtime in my house and dinner time at your house, Aran.
Yeah, I actually was cooking dinner right before. Did you do an instant family meal for dinner tonight?
I did not do. I was like, she's gonna ask me that. No, I didn't. I did a super simple dinner. I've been cooking, as probably all of us have, 3 hot meals a day for so long. And tonight I said, early bedtime, Mama's got an event, and we just had, beautiful things on toast tonight.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yes.
You were in Seattle a year ago.
Yes, I can't believe it's already been a year. Actually,
I have both of your books here. I'm sure, everybody's here for instant family meals, but if you haven't, I still have all my Post-its from
I love it.
last time. If you haven't seen this one, I feel like they're like a really good pair. One is like, to me, maybe, it's not necessarily only the photography. One reminds me of like summer, just like more, there are meals here that can be instant, like definitely made in a pressure cooker and all of that, but just more like I don't know, just reminds me of summer.
Dreamy, I know, I have my twin copies with me too. I would say every day Saturday is like a dreamy weekend vibes, like you've got a little more wiggle room in your schedule, but even though they're not complicated meals, they're very, very simple. But they feel more luxurious and more weekendy, even though you can do them on a weeknight. And this is like, let's get to work. The kids are hungry. Everybody's wants a new idea for dinner because we've all been, especially now, we've all been home together and having the same repertoire over and over. Yeah, they are very different. I would say really different, especially back to back.
Yeah, but I feel like this is also almost like like a little winter accompanying book, or like it's just like it makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how this came about after kind of weekend feeling like long summer days, weekend cooking, what you were just referring to, and then something that is like this.
Well, it was so interesting because after I was out there with you in Seattle, I had toured the whole summer, not this past summer during COVID, but the summer before. I had book toured the whole summer from the East Coast to the West Coast, you know, from Seattle down to LA with every day is Saturday. And I came home from that. I was so just full of energy and overjoyed and also exhausted. I hadn't really been with my family. I was gone for 6 weeks off and on. And I came home and suddenly I had these big kids and we were starting school. My son was starting pre-K, you know, almost a full day, 5 days a week. I had 2 kids in 2 different schools. My older daughter, Greta, who's 10, is like in so many activities. And at the same time, we had this kind of crazy fall, not even knowing what was happening coming in February and March, but it was like it snowed in October. My oven started kind of giving out. There was just so much going on at once. And meanwhile, Raquel Pazell from Clarkson Potter reached out to me and said, we're thinking about doing an Instant Pot cookbook and we'd love you to write it. And you seem like it, we'd love to see what your Instant Pot cookbook would be. And I paused on it for a minute because it felt really like a departure from my normal way of doing things. I'm so a la minute. I love to cook the way I taught, you know, the way I learned in French pastry kitchens and French kitchens and working over in France, just like gather what you find at the market and gather from my garden and just cook things on the fly. And also, I don't use very many appliances. You know, I use my Dutch oven, my cast iron skillet, my chef's knife, and my hands, you know, maybe a rolling pin. So I had to pause on that for a minute, but then I really thought, that's probably what I need to be using more. I have one. I probably need to be using it more to get my own hot dinners on the table with these big kids that have bigger appetites now. You know, when your kids are little, they kind of pick and they like everything separated. And, you know, so all the things I was making before were working for that. But then all of a sudden, you know, these big appetites and winter came. And then on top of it, COVID. And that was when I was writing the book. So I said yes. And I dove in head first and I got a second and a third Instant Pot and I just had them going all the time. Now, I would never do that again in real life. One at a time is fine for me. But what it taught me really, really quickly is what works, what doesn't, when you need it, when you don't. You know, I would never turn on an Instant Pot to make banana bread. I think it's so interesting that there's so many recipes out there for like, you know, I don't know, things that just don't need to be made in an Instant Pot, things that are perfectly lovely in an oven.
Well, can I interrupt you for a second? Since you're talking about that,
You need to about me because you remember I have long answers.
No, it's pertinent to what you're saying. So, oh, that's not the page. Wait. So I was curious because I also think about like when people use Instant Pots to make yogurt and stuff like that, that I don't ever use. And then I saw your flan.
Right.
And I thought, well, I would never do that. But when I see it, it makes sense because it's so much more controlled. And I think a lot of people always fear, like they don't know what water bath and like they don't know how to control it or how to look at it or how to know when it's done. And so it's like, I've never made flan in a pressure cooker, but I think maybe I need to try it to see.
I know, I was wondering if you had tried that yet and what you were, we've never had an offline conversation about the flan because my husband and I both are totally crazy about flan. And I was like, let me just try it. I love making pudding and, you know, water baths never have bothered me. But again, we're professionally trained to do it. And I know that it makes people nervous. And especially I think people with young children, like pouring the hot water in or carrying like a hot tray full of water to make a perfect cheesecake or perfect flan or pudding or anything like that. So I tried it in there and it was so delicious and it was so fast. And after that, I started making it all the time. And it was like flan was always to me a restaurant thing. I thought of you when I thought of flan, I thought of my Spanish friends and I thought of restaurant life. And not something that I could easily or would easily make at home a lot. And I think there's a few things in here like that, like, you know, on the savory side, ragouts and bolognese and things that you think of as like a big project. You know, in my previous book, I have a chapter called Projects where I say, like, you know, you get in the headspace of we're going to make something special right now and we're going to take a little time to do it. But there are kind of some projects in here that become less project-y because of the pressure cooker. And the flan turned out so fabulously. And then I started making it all the time. One morning, my husband and I like ate the whole thing for breakfast on accident. We were like, oh my gosh, this is so good and so easy.
Yeah.
And so there's things like that, like cheesecake that I hadn't made in 15 years since I worked in restaurants, that I now make again very frequently because of this book, because of the
probably better in some ways because it's a little bit more controlled.
Right, more controlled. They never crack.
Yeah.
And so what you can do in the pressure cooker is you can undercook ever so slightly a cheesecake or flan or something, walk away from it, and that's when when the pressure is releasing, you get that carryover cooking where something's just perfectly textured, and then by the time you release it, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be as cautious.
So did you grow up with pressure cookers, or maybe
No.
more slow cooker?
No, my mom never made, she cooked the same as me, fresh from scratch every night, but her meals were more like protein, a vegetable, or meat and potatoes, or, protein and a starch. And I remember she used a pressure cooker once, and I remember her using a crock pot, like an electric crock pot where the pot actually sat on the hot plate once. I only remember seeing either one. And I remember the pressure cooker looked like a death sentence. It was so scary. She never used them. So I didn't grow up with them. And in fact, the funny thing is, as a recipe developer for so many years, working for all these different magazines, anything from, Martha Stewart to Food and Wine to the New York Times and everything in between, Good Housekeeping, whatever. As a recipe developer, when I would get assigned, like, can you create 5 slow cooker meals or 5 Instant Pot meals, I'd be like, oh man, I got the short end of the stick. Like, this is not glamorous to me in my mind. But I also didn't have 2 little kids then, and who were in sports and different schools. And, I wasn't running my own full-time business and my husband running a full-time business from the home at the same time. So put all those things together in our modern family life. And it's a perfect tool for, what I think what I'm proud of, not that you asked, but I'll tell you.
Tell me. Tell
What
us.
I'm proud of about this book is like to be able to do food that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And feels like all of my food from different books, but that people can do in a cinch,
Yeah.
I know this is one of your favorites too, but one of mine.
Yeah. No, I thought it was the stew. I actually made the stew.
Oh, you did? How was it?
Well, because I showed you, but my son, who has he's a teenager now and has a huge appetite. He actually was looking through the book, and he asked me this to ask you, and I'm not making this up.
I love it.
I told him I was talking to you, and he said that when he goes to college, this is true, this afternoon, he said when he goes to college, he wants to have an Instant Pot, but he also wants to have an air fryer. And he wants to know if you think an air fryer is actually a good investment.
That's so darling.
Do you have any experience with air fryer?
I'm not an early adopter to anything like, the pot roast is so delicious because it has harissa in it. And, I write about this in the book that my mom made pot roasts probably every 2 weeks. She would make a pot roast, and there were 6 of us. And I felt like there was this piece of meat and like 2 carrots that we had to divide between 6 people. And I wanted all the brothy meat jus carrots and a few potatoes and like this much meat, which is interesting because I later became a vegetarian. I'm not anymore, but later married a vegetarian and raising a vegetarian. So I clearly liked the flavor of what it did to the vegetables, but I didn't really want to eat a lot of the meat. And, there was never seconds. So this pot roast I wanted to make with like tons of vegetables and tons of flavor. But to answer your question, I mean, I'm not an early adopter to anything. I was never like the first person to get an iPod, 10, 15 years ago, or the first person to have the new iPad or the new phone. Same with an air fryer. I don't own one. I've never used one, but I have friends who swear by them.
Yeah.
I will say the thing about the Instant Pot, whether it's Instant Pot brand or whatever, there's so many things you can do in it. I have used a rice cooker for the last 10 years to make rice And I used it today to make rice for lunch, you know, we just had rice and eggs and kimchi and soy sauce. But then once the Instant Pot came in my life, it's like you can do rice plus porridge plus, you know, jams and jellies plus sauces plus full dinners. And, you know, some of the fish dishes in here, like shrimp curry or the salmon curry, I'm trying to show the picture for people who don't have it yet at home. The shrimp curry, it takes like 15 minutes, you know, and so these are full meals that kind of take the same amount of time as cooking a pot of rice in a rice cooker. But now because it's a pressure cooker, you can put the whole layers in, you can put the vegetables, the sauce, the protein, and it's all done at once.
I haven't cooked rice. I have an Instant Pot, and I have to say I use it. I probably don't use it to its full potential.
Right.
I use it to make broth because I make a lot of bone broth, stews and beans and things that I grew up with making. But there's so many ideas here that I was like, wow, I didn't know that you could do it. Like rice, it wouldn't have occurred to me to make it. So I think that, you know, there's so many things to be made with it.
Right, like biryani rice or the turmeric rice in the book. I would have in the past made rice in the rice cooker and then kind of like taken it out, put it in another pan and seasoned it. But now I will put the cinnamon stick and the clove and the cardamom and onion and ghee and everything in the pot with the rice and push the buttons. In 15 minutes I come back and I've got like this super fragrant side and enough of it for dinner tonight and like the next 2 days lunch.
So there's a really good question because you're talking about flavor. How do you develop flavors in Instant Pot?
It's such a good question. And I talk about this a lot in here because there are things like the kimchi stew, or I have, you know, I have some beef broth, like a pho style beef broth in the back of the book. The bolognese is a perfect example. The pot roast. I'm always using something to quote unquote, like kind of cheat the depth that you would get from something simmering on the stovetop in a Dutch oven for 3 hours, because now you're only cooking it 45 minutes. So like I use harissa in the pot roast, and then cider vinegar at the end, which is pretty typical, but the harissa just amps it up so much. I use a lot of Hungarian hot pepper paste or smoked paprika, or like in my pulled pork, which I've been doing pulled pork in the oven or on the stovetop for years. And I have a magic pork shoulder in my last book that I love. But in the Instant Pot, I add soy sauce, even though the pulled pork is for tacos and we're going to go in a more Mexican direction. I'm using soy sauce because I want to just amp that umami of the pork normally cooking for 3 hours on the stove or in the oven.
Do you use the saute function in it, or do you?
I do for like a soup, you know, so I would start my onions and bloom my turmeric or bloom my, you know, caraway seed or whatever it is. And then add everything else, close it up. Because I find that in an Instant Pot pressure cooker or a slow cooker, onions and garlic do not improve unless you cook them first.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that from, you know, recipe developing for years. And then you'd make something in the slow cooker and it would be in there for 8 hours. I don't use a slow cooker very much at home for myself, but I give 25% of the recipes in this book can be made in the slow cooker. And I tell you how. Of course, they've all been, you know, I tested them in all the different devices. And if it was great in the pressure cooker, but it was just like, okay, in the slow cooker, we just dropped the slow cooker version. Because I only wanted you know, there's so many recipes on the internet. I didn't want even one person to have a okay meal. I wanted everything to be, of course we do that with every book, right? But for this, it felt like the stakes were even higher because someone might go buy the pressure cooker and then have it for the first time. So I wanted them to have success out of the gate every time.
Yeah. And it's an investment. You're buying an appliance.
Right.
You want to be able to use it. There's also a really good question. How do you remove the scents and flavors from the Instant Pot? I use the Instant Pot all the time, but I'm wary of using it to make such flavorful recipes. And I have that problem too. I've cleaned my seal and all kinds of things, but like I can't always when I've made broths with turmeric and ginger and like really strong sort of spices, then it's like, I imagine with the pho too, like it will stay there.
Right. I mean, the only smells that I find off-putting that stick are like cauliflower and rutabaga. I make a lot of cauliflower soup. It's really quick. It's like 20 minutes in here. You can put almost the whole head in and just add water, and you know, you're going to add a little bit of fat to it at the end. And it's so fast and so delicious. My whole family loves it. But the cauliflower smell, or rutabaga, the other day I just made a cauliflower rutabaga potato mash. I had a little bit left of each and I just threw it all in there with some water and steamed them and then pureed them. That smell will stay strong. The other smells, I feel like the smell is somewhat there. Maybe the coloring, like the turmeric can stay on the plastic ring. I wash the plastic ring, I pull it out, put it in the dishwasher. And I've only had my Instant Pots for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, the ones I'm using now. But I do feel like you should replace that plastic ring every year. And they say that. They say you can replace the plastic ring, you know, you can dishwash it and it's not a big deal. And that for my opinion, the smell does come out enough that I'm not making like porridge on Thursday morning and it smells like, you know, bolognese from Tuesday night. I've never had that happen. I've never had the smells transfer to one another. But I know that when you're done cooking it and you first wash it, it's kind of like, whoa, this is really pungent.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because I do have that issue. Do you recommend specific Instant Pots?
I use Instant Pot brand. I have, of course, to develop the book, I borrowed like 10 different versions from everybody, like the Ninja and this, that, and the other. To me, Instant Pot's kind of, I'm not affiliated with them, just so you know, not affiliated at all. The book is independent. We don't have a sponsor or anything like that. It's meant to work in all different devices. But I do feel that Instant Pot brand has worked out the kinks. And so all the buttons and the panels on the front can be used to your advantage, but you don't really need them. And the more complicated the machines get, the more, I think, intimidating they are for people. I like that the Instant Pot, you can just use the saute button, the pressure cooker. You can kind of ignore the rest of the panel if you don't want to use it. I do use the yogurt panel when I make yogurt. You know, and a lot of people are like, why would you make yogurt? You could go, you know, but I like really creamy European style yogurt. And I like that I can buy a unhomogenized local milk or even a raw milk and make 6 quarts of yogurt. And it's really inexpensive. Whereas if I go to like a fancy local store and buy 6 quarts of cream on top local yogurt, each quart is like $9. So I like that I can make it, but that's really the only specialty button I use. I think there are a lot of other good brands. I know I use Crate & Barrel's version, or I'm sorry, Le Creuset's version that they sell at Crate & Barrel is nice. And you can use it as a slow cooker or a pressure cooker. There's a few out there that I think are really good. And of course, now people are just learning from what Instant Pot did, and they're all kind of getting a little better.
I have an Instant Pot and I haven't tried anything else. So, and I have the 8, I think the 8 quart is the biggest one, right?
Yeah, 8 quart.
I buy, just as an example, I buy at the farmer's market, I buy a hen. So I like a really inexpensive local, you know, pasture raised hen. And I make probably 10 quarts of stock with it. And it's super, like rich stock that if you were to buy at the store, you're paying like 3 times more.
Right. And you get, you know,
like
bone broth. It's tiny. You get like a tiny little quart of $10 bone broth, you know?
And I actually, with I'm talking about myself too much, but with the hen,
oh, you're
I
not.
run it twice. So I make the first broth, right? Like, which will be the most flavorful and it's like really fatty. And then I actually fill it again with water and add more vegetables. And I kind of do a second, like I do a second.
That's so smart.
Yeah. So then I get like, you know, so I get a lot of bone broth.
Yeah, that's really smart. And then the other one is more vegetable forward and the first one is more chicken.
Yeah. And like really.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then do you use the meat or you're just using the bones?
I use the bones. I mean, it has meat on it.
Right.
I usually buy it frozen and I put it in frozen.
Wow.
So I should be using the meat, and it feels really wasteful if I don't. But honestly, I don't always use the meat because it's, I kind of cook it for a long time.
You're
So
cooking it to death. Yeah.
yeah. So I apologize. But I wanted to say back to the seal. Lindsay says, I keep a seal for savory and a seal for sweet. So
That's
a good
smart.
idea.
That's really smart. If you use it a lot, and I would be curious to see of our participants here tonight, how many people, are here because they already love and use Instant Pot, or there's probably a lot of people who don't, who maybe like our other work and are curious to try it out. I would be curious at the end, we can talk more about that. We want to get to everybody's questions, but I know that there, and I can always also answer DM questions about Instant Pot, because I find that there are diehards that have been using it for years or use it, several times a week. And then there's people who like the recipes in the book and are like, okay, now I'm going to try to make them an Instant Pot. It's kind of fun to see.
Yeah. And like I grew up, my mom uses a pressure cooker.
Oh, she does. That's amazing.
Stovetop. Oh, in the Basque Country, a stovetop pressure cooker is like, I don't know, like a cast iron pan, or everybody has one. And so I grew up, every day we would eat lentils or beans or stew or chickpea soup or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So there's a use, it almost lives on the stovetop. And but I was always afraid of it, I have to say.
I think the stovetop was a story. I only used it once, out of culinary school. I think I was working at the Food Network at the time. And I used it and I was terrified. I was embarrassed that I was so scared about it. But I was, because it was stovetop and you couldn't control it and it would spew out. And of course, that's all been worked out in the electric version. But probably for your mom, it's like daily use. It's just like using a sewing machine. Like you think you're going to run your finger over, but if you sew every day, but that's so, she was smart, because you can produce a lot of really flavorful, very nourishing food. I will say, I think that's been the learning curve for me, is that as my children get older and need to eat more, I'm very happy to have a salad at night. I like to eat a big breakfast, like a big, beautiful bowl of porridge with a ton of toppings on it and maybe a little nut butter, and very satisfying. And I love soup for lunch, but I'm very happy to eat a salad at dinner, but no little kid wants to eat salad for dinner, especially not like more than once a week. So I think I'm able now to make them just so many more, like your mom was serving you, big, nourishing meals, like warm beans with pesto on it, or, I have in the front of the book, just like eggs and beans. And it takes a few minutes to cook. And now that I know everybody loves it, I'm going to find it. It's just saucy beans and eggs. It takes 5 minutes to make it. And you can use beans that you've already cooked, or you can use canned beans. But if you've already cooked the beans in the pressure cooker, adding this in just takes 5 minutes. And then you make your little pesto. And that's one thing I should mention, and I talk about in the book a lot, that if you're not already using a pressure cooker and you think it's going to kind of destroy your fresh way of cooking, one thing that I think is distinctive about my book is that I talk about how, like, adding a fresh green topping, whether it's herbs or pesto or pistu or, these sauces that I use in all my books, or roasted chickpeas on top of a soup or a sauce or a pot of beans will make it really come to life and more flavorful,
We actually, there's a saying in Spanish that is, in Spain in general, comer de cuchara, which means to eat with your spoon. So it refers to anything that you cook. Not everything you make in a pressure cooker you eat with a spoon, but in general, it means like you're eating hearty and you're eating for nutrition.
Right.
If it's related to cooking something for a long time, something that maybe in the US, it doesn't seem as fresh, but in our culture, when you cook something for a long time, it's actually really nourishing for you.
Right. Super nourishing, big flavors. It's warm. You fill your belly. I studied Ayurvedic cooking, which is slightly off topic, but I studied nutrition after culinary school, because I was pre-med when I went to college. So I was really interested in the human body and the way we function as humans. But then I took this detour and went to culinary school and got into journalism and writing and food writing. But I was still very interested in not just food as fun and flavor and beauty, but as nourishment. And so then I went to nutrition school after that. And when I studied all the different diets, Western diets, Eastern diets, when I studied Ayurvedic medicine, it was interesting to really learn how important a hot and spicy meal is for certain body types, including my body type, my Ayurvedic type, and how much more grounded you can feel when you, especially in the winter. I mean, I've lived my whole life in a 4-season culture, and I grew up near Chicago and I now live in upstate New York. Like, talk about cold winters. I mean, bitterly cold winters. And you need that warm, nourishing food. And I love that you even have a specific term for that in Spanish culture. That's talk about a book idea, Aran. That's a good one.
Soon. I had a question about what you were saying and it left me, but there's two questions
about the nourishing factor.
There's two questions about being a single person with an Instant Pot, which they tend to be sort of larger appliances, and that you want to make a bigger meal, and how you would I'm imagining you freeze things, and somebody is suggesting sharing it with other people, which right now is perfect.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, this would be two good examples. Like you were talking about, you make your chicken stock. So this is double duty poached chicken and broth. So this is just something I make a lot. I bring it home from the store and I throw it right in. And then I would immediately remove my chicken and shred it. And I would shred it into a zip bag. And the reason I do it into a zip bag versus like a container is that I can then just pour some of the broth over the chicken, and a little bit of that fat from the broth goes in there and it kind of seals around it. And then I push the air out. Of course, if you had one of those zipper, I don't have one of those zipper, like cryovac machines, but I just push the air out of the zip bag, and then I freeze that little pocket of chicken with a little broth. And you could do like 6 of those or 5 of those, right? One breast, another breast, some leg meat, and freeze those, and then use as much chicken as you want for tonight, and then quart up your stock and freeze most of it and keep one out. And then you're ready to make pozole, chicken soup, I mean, there's a million things, chicken lasagna, enchiladas, quesadillas, whatever. Just pull out that chicken as you want it. The bolognese is another perfect one. This makes a lot, but it gets better and better and better. And I keep a lot of things in jars. I gift a lot of things in jars. I put a big thing of bolognese in one of those ball jars with the lid, and it's just like such a beautiful way to say, like, thanks for your help last week to my neighbor, or welcome the baby home, or whatever. And then if you're single, freezing those is perfect, because the more flavor and fat in it, the longer and better it will freeze. So like a bolognese is perfect for that, because you have the meat juice fat and then all that flavor from the harissa and the tomato and everything. So it doesn't pick up those freezer flavors the way, say, like a baguette. If you want to freeze half a baguette, if you're single, and in 3 days, it tastes kind of freezer burned. Mm-hmm. But these kinds of things don't do that as much. They hold really well. And even in the fridge, they get better and better for days.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love the idea of like freezing the meat with a little bit of the broth.
Right.
Preserve it really well. Let's see. Do you have a yogurt recipe in the book? Yes.
Yes, I have a yogurt recipe, and then I teach you how to make it into maple. Well, I have regular yogurt. I have coconut yogurt. We have a fair amount of gluten-free and vegan friends. So that's something I should mention, is that I have about, in my most 2 recent books, this has become really important to me to have a special diets index. And so you can look in the back of the book and say, oh, okay, well, I'm vegan, and look at this chart, which is on page 188. And you can find every recipe that's vegan, or every recipe that's gluten-free, or every recipe that's vegetarian, or what's the other diet we have? Dairy-free. So I love that, because you can make sure it applies to you and your family. But to say the question again, because I kind of went sideways on that question.
Let's see. Did that question get answered? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't have the chat open. But anyway, yeah. So
the yogurt. Yeah.
Oh, the yogurt. So I have dairy-free yogurt, coconut yogurt, regular yogurt, and then I teach you how to make that regular yogurt into maple yogurt or lemon yogurt. There are some variations in there. So
Yeah, there's a lot of basics, which is
Yes.
great, and a lot of explanation about like the appliance itself and burning and all sort of
Right.
technical questions, which I think are sometimes the intimidating part of
Right.
pressure cookers. Although I feel like the electric ones, like the Instant Pot, are really like you just follow a recipe. It tells you, most recipes tell you release manually for 10 minutes. Then
For 10 minutes, there's
whatever.
not a lot of wiggle room. So this is the interesting thing, and why I think it's so important to have super good, super well vetted recipes, and why I would never go on the internet to get an Instant Pot recipe, because there's no variable. You cannot troubleshoot and fix. You can't open it and taste it and be like, oh, I don't like that, or that's too acidic for me, or it needs more salt, or I want to cook it more. Because once you seal it, it's all doing the work. So you need to make sure you have a really well tested and trusted source for Instant Pot or any kind of, slow cooker recipes where you're not going to taste it until the end.
And I also find that the water content is usually like a lot of recipes that I've sort of made like that with that I found, and not to say that there aren't good recipes online, but I'm just saying like that recipes that I don't know that they've been tested or whatever.
Right.
That it takes a lot less liquid to
a lot less liquid because it's
Yeah.
steaming. And so like if you were to normally make something with, the tomatoes and their liquid from a 28-ounce can, you might only need the tomatoes and half the liquid, or something that normally needs 4 cups of water might only need 2, because there's no evaporation. So that's a learning curve. If you're trying to adapt something from a regular recipe to an Instant Pot recipe, you want to really think that stuff through.
The other thing is I wanted to ask you what you think it makes these recipes modern. Like what is, I mean, I know what you cook is always modern to me, but when you talk about modern, like there's something about, and you were saying this before, pressure cooker and slow cooker and all these things seem sort of, I don't know, like you thought, oh, that's not what I do, or like appliance stuff, I don't do that.
Right.
And now you've given them a modern spin. And I think for me, like when I see it and when I hear you speak, it really has to do with the flavor, like how you think about incorporating, whether it's harissa, like you were saying, or soy sauce, or all these things, all the spices that you're incorporating. And I think that's what makes it modern, like your personal touch. But how did you approach it? Like were you just, this is how I cook, or were you really conscious of like, I'm going to make this modern?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think it's both. I think it's how I cook. I think it's living in New York City for 15 years. And I think interestingly, Instagram has been such an interesting, when I first moved to New York City, I moved from a place where you could get I moved from Illinois to Missouri, where I went to journalism school, to New York City. And the first 2 places I lived in my life, it was mostly Midwestern American food. And then like one good Chinese restaurant, one good Italian restaurant, a few things you could get. Like maybe Thai was just like starting to creep in, but then I moved to New York City and you could get everything. You could get Vietnamese, you could get Burmese, you could get Chinese, you could get everything. A very specific, Spanish tapas place, and then another kind of Spanish, like everything under the sun. And so having that access was really fun. And like, so when I wrote my second book, Feast, not the rest of the world wasn't necessarily ready for those flavors. So I included a lot of those flavors in that book. And it was also vegetarian, and it was a lot of the world wasn't eating vegetarian yet either. A lot of the Western world wasn't eating vegetarian yet. So there was a little bit of a gap between what I knew and was regular for me living in New York City and what a huge audience could get living outside. Well, now I think that book, Feast, is like 8 years old. 8 years later, and Instagram came on the scene and blogs came on the scene, and blogs were kind of there, but there were only a few, like you and a few other big bloggers. But Instagram changed that, where like everybody has access all the time to whoever's eating in Los Angeles and whoever's eating in, what is Ben Mims eating in the, in the LA Times right now, and who's making what, and everyone's available to see that. And so And then, you know, obviously online shopping, and you can get these spices everywhere, and you can have everything shipped to your home. So that made it more possible to write a book like this book, which includes a ton of flavors from my life in New York City, things that I used to get as takeout. And then I moved out of the city and I can no longer get, but I still want. And my kids, even especially Greta, ate her whole life living in New York City until she was 5. And she loves those foods. And I love those foods. And Andras and I fell in love over these foods, you know, our dating life, going out to restaurants. And then here we are back in a place where, you know, there's a good pizza place. There's one noodle shop. I have to go pretty far across the river to get like good Indian food. And so I didn't include those recipes because I'm the expert on those things. I'm not, you know, certainly I've learned those things from other cultures, but I included those things because if you live in a place like I do now, where I can't get them unless I make them, I wanted you to be able to make them in this book. So I think the modernness of it is just that there's access to a lot, and that I understand that, you know, we all, most of us are so much more open and aren't, even if you grew up Spanish, right? You're not eating Spanish food every night, you know?
I mean, I think my way of cooking and shopping, and that is very much how I grew up, but definitely incorporating a lot of things that I've seen and tasted along the way.
Right. And certainly your kids, right? Being born in the States,
Yeah.
probably have or will have a craving for things that they, you know, that your parents wouldn't have never served for you, or my parent, you know, my mom just didn't have access for any of this information. And so modern to me, I guess, is like, number one, like the fresh factor in the end, and lots of sauces and lots of toppings and crunch and flavor. But I think the modern is also like a fluidity and a flexibility between cuisines that I'm just a passionate learner and appreciator of.
Yeah. And also because there's, you know, like just adding a few little things that you've learned from, whether it was cooking with other people or eating other people's foods.
Right.
Sort of adds something, it builds on something that's a little bit more traditional.
Right.
You know, pressure cooking, like I said, for me, it's like really traditional. But then when I made this, your pot roast or stew, like I called it, adding harissa or like all these little things are just sort of like a little bit different and more exciting than how I would have made it just the way I grew up. So
Right.
yeah, so I can see that. I can appreciate that in the book. What are you making something with a pressure cooker or any other appliance, you know, instant pot or anything else for the holidays?
Probably not. I mean, just to be totally honest, I did on Thanksgiving. I thought for Thanksgiving, it was like a genius move, because for Thanksgiving, we did a capon. My daughter just became vegetarian over the summer. My husband's always been vegetarian. And so then like a couple of days before Thanksgiving, she said, actually, mommy, I want to eat turkey on Thanksgiving. Just once a year, I want to eat turkey. No, she just eats fish, and then she's pescatarian. So I was like, oh, well, I didn't plan on making a turkey because you and Daddy don't eat it. So at the last minute, I get a capon, which is like between a turkey and a chicken. It was delicious. I mean, you know, I did Samin's buttermilk brined, whatever, capon, which she designed for the turkey breast. Anyway, so that was in the oven, and then we made pies in the oven. So everything else going in the pressure cooker was kind of a genius move. I made the mashed potatoes in the pressure cooker, the sweet potatoes. So if you're having that kind of a meal, like a lot of families have the Thanksgiving meal again at Christmas, then it would make sense. I don't want to have that meal again at Christmas this year, because this is the first year in my entire life since I was born that I will not be with my parents. And the first time my children will not be with my parents. Christmas to them is at grandma's house. And so I just feel like it's in a time to like just totally depart from tradition. So I think I'm going to make Sunday sauce on Christmas Eve, bûche de Noël for Christmas Day. And then my wish is, having spent so many years in New York City, is to do like, we used to walk, my husband and I would walk downtown in Chinatown, and you would see all the Peking ducks, and a lot of the New York families that weren't Christian, that weren't celebrating Christmas. Some of them either were celebrating Hanukkah or not celebrating anything. They would get Peking duck and Chinese takeout. And so I suggested that we do something like really a traditional, or sushi, or something really fun. Greta vetoed that. So we're still developing our menu for Christmas Day, but I know I'm doing Sunday sauce from everyday Saturday to Sunday sauce on Christmas Eve. And I just don't want to cook all day on Christmas. This is like, I cook every day of my life, 3 times a day, hot meals plus dishes. So I just want to be with my family and relax. What are you doing for Christmas? What's your traditional Spanish?
So, sorry, I almost fell. Well, I always cook a fish soup for Christmas Eve.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
so, and we always have friends over. I haven't been with my family for Christmas in 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
It's actually really sad. And then that is my aunt, also Aran, who passed away. And she used to make this salad called Russian salad, which I don't really know if it's a Russian salad, but in Spanish it's called ensaladilla rusa. And so I'm going to make that in her honor.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's kind of like it's almost like a potato. It's like a salad that it's a mayo-based salad, which is very unusual. Like, I don't really eat that, but it has potatoes, eggs, tuna. It's in olive oil, olives, roasted red peppers. It's sort of like almost like a potato salad texture. But I'm going to make that.
And speaking of potato, I feel like Spanish tortilla would be such a good Christmas morning brunch.
Oh yeah, but I make that every. I make that every.
It already, but maybe I'll make it this. I think I've told you, I'm finally learning it. I finally got the difference between my good Spanish tortilla that I've learned from you and our friend Pato and her family. And then the great one, like, is just the practice. And I know you make it all the time, and I've only made it 5 times or 6 times in my life. And now I'm starting to make it, once a month, and now I'm finally getting it.
Yeah. It's like one of those things that it's so simple.
Right.
That just like having a feel for how hot the oil is when you fry the potatoes, like all of that. It's more like you're not really frying, you're almost like poaching or confit.
Right. And the thinness or thickness of the potato, these things, these nuances.
Yeah, it's all, when there's not that many ingredients, like all those little details really count.
Really matter. Yeah, exactly.
Look at the questions again.
Well, I want to hear, I think we should ask each other one important question. Well, I know everyone's going to want to know what you have coming up. I know you have the baking book, which has been beautiful to watch unfold. I'm very excited to hear more about that. And when is that coming out?
It's coming out next fall, hopefully, if all goes well. And yes, it's going to be 100 plus baking recipes that are all gluten-free and dairy-free, many of them vegan. And that's what I've been working on. I just finished photography about a week ago, and I did my first big copy edit run and pass. And so, yeah, that's what I've been doing.
That's incredible. It's going to be so beautiful.
Do you have any more books? You're so prolific.
I had a book idea that I set to the side when Raquel reached out to me to do Instant Family Meals. I was already about to move forward on another book idea that I set to the side. And so I still want to do that book. And then there's another really special book I'd like to do that I'll tell you about another time. But I feel like I have 2 more books that I want to do soon.
Wow.
And then I might take a pause. I had, I think, 7 years between Feast and then Everyday Saturday, because I went to work for Real Simple, and that was 5 years I was there, and I had a second baby and we moved upstate. So I only wanted to ever want to do a book that I'm super excited to do, and that is clawing its way out of me, because as you know, it's so much work, and you want it to be so good, and you want to test everything so perfectly, and you want it to come in the world at the right times and all of that. So I don't ever want to just be like, oh, I should do another book. I remember talking to authors and saying years ago when there weren't so many cookbooks, and I would go to IACP and people who were like 20 years ahead of me in their career would be like, and then once I turn in my book, I like to have the next proposal in line, and that works out financially and this, that. I just don't think that way. I'm more like, if I passionately like have to tell this story and I have a whole new set of recipes that are things I weren't making before or weren't in my previous books, and I have a new way to share it, then I want to write books. And if it's ever like I should write another book because that's a good idea, then I'm probably not going to do it. So,
And I think also you're thinking your recipes, I don't know who it was. Actually, somebody sent me a message. I think it was a common friend. She sent me a message when I posted about this event, and she said she only goes to trusted recipes. And I do think, I mean, that's your background as an editor. And
so
you're
nice.
always thinking of longevity with recipes, because, and I don't mean longevity like whether they're modern or, I mean like people going back to them over
Right,
and
using
over
them again and again.
And I think, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, but because I know that to be true, and that's so important because you want people to actually, and I want that for my books too. That
right, of course, you want people to. I think the most flattering thing about these last two books, and especially my first book too, because I get people who say, "Oh, I got your Newlywed Cookbook for a wedding gift 10 years ago, and we still use it, or 5 years ago, and we still make your, roast chicken dinner every Tuesday night," or whatever. I think that's the most flattering and the biggest compliment. I mean, Amazon reviews are fabulous, and even if you buy the book from Booklarder, and I hope you do, people always say, how can I help you as an author? Buy local, but you can still leave a review on Amazon that you love this book, because that helps us so much. But the highest compliment for me is when I get like, oh, we make your waffle every Saturday. We make your pancake every Sunday morning. My kids don't want another one. The repeat is so flattering. Just like if you had a restaurant and, the same family came every Friday night. Mm-hmm. I think that makes me feel the most accomplished, really, versus like even, it's nice to get a James Beard nomination or whatever, but what makes me feel accomplished is that a family, you've somehow found your way into a family's new tradition. And I think that's really special.
Yeah. And also the word of mouth of people really sharing books that they like with other people, like
right, exactly.
Your book to other people. And I think that's like, and hopefully that's what people will go to Booklarder, buy this book and gift it to everybody.
Right. Booklarder has the only signed copies in the country.
That's awesome.
Well, actually our local bookstore, Rough Draft, also has signed copies right now. But Booklarder, they were the first to reach out and say, send me your book plates. And so, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Let me look through the questions.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, what are your thoughts on different size Instant Pots? I have an 8-quart and it seems that most recipes are developed for 6-quart.
Most of my recipes you can use for 6 or 8-quart. I always say if you're a family of 4 or more, get the 8-quart. If you're a couple, single, or you just have like one little kid, like a toddler or a young child, the 6-quart is probably enough. But I talked to you about this in here. There's only a few recipes where I'll say, like, if you're making this in the 6-quart, you might need a cup less water. But for the most part, these recipes are to be made in either the 6 or the 8-quart, and they're tested on everything.
And then also a good question is, when you started cooking this way, what was your biggest lesson that you learned, and what were your resources that you talk about that? I feel like there's a lot of troubleshooting.
Yes, there's a lot of troubleshooting in the beginning. Because I had to dive in so quickly. So like the first 2 weeks I said to my editor, give me 2 weeks to like be sure I can be the person to give really solid sound advice. And so for 2 weeks, I tested ridiculous things that no one's ever said to do in the Instant Pot before. And then the things that everyone does in the Instant Pot. And then the things I thought, well, what would this be better, easier, or harder in the Instant Pot? Like, I'm not someone who's ever going to pull out my stand mixer if I could do it by hand, because I hate washing. I don't like having stuff on my counters. I liked everything to be tucked away, all my appliances tucked away. So if all the roadblocks that were in my mind were there, what is someone who like, what are the roadblocks for the general public? So I wanted to make sure I could get past all those roadblocks and arguments against the Instant Pot and make it worth both my time to spend an entire year cooking from the Instant Pot for my friends and family and write the book on it. So I think, you know, that skepticism for me was really high. And then I got past that hurdle in the first week. I was like, man, this thing is bonkers. If you really dive in and you know what you're doing, you can just cook so much, so fast. And so, you know, like we talked about, just so much flavor, which is.
And I'm not an expert at all. And I am definitely not sponsored, nobody's promoting me, but I have to say I'm one of those converts. And also I don't use it all the time every day, but I probably use it 3 times a week.
Yeah. I mean, and there are definitely weeks where like, I'm just cooking a different way where I put it away and we're not using it as much. And then I'll get it back out. I'll be like, I'm going to make porridge tonight and set the timer and have it made in the morning. And then, well, it's out. Let me wash it. I'm going to make the cauliflower soup that I make like at least once a week. And then it's out. Oh, okay. Then I'm going to make the biryani rice for dinner or whatever. And then once it's kind of in your repertoire and it's out on the counter for a little while, and then I might be like having a photo shoot and I put everything in the basement, all my appliances away. And then it's just like out of sight, out of mind. I might not cook in it for 10 days or a week or 2. And then something will bring me back to it every time, you know? So I'm not someone who's saying, once you get it, you're never going to cook another way. There's a time and a place for this. And I think right now during COVID with families at home and, you know, we're not eating in restaurant as much and it's winter, even if you live somewhere warm, it's a perfect time. It's like the perfect time.
It's also very, to me, the convenience of it and the sense of timing that you can leave. Oftentimes I just leave my stock overnight and then then it cools naturally because it takes, one of the things that to me, and maybe it's the way I use it and the things that I make require a lot of liquid.
A lot of liquid and then a long cool time. And
then it takes a long time to heat up and boil and then cool down. And so I do all of that overnight. And then by the time
sometimes I just set the whole Instant Pot outside on my back porch.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Cool. I bring it in and then take the insert out and decant my broth or whatever, strain it. I mean, that wouldn't work if you have bears or raccoons or anything like right outside your house. That could be a real disaster. Your beautiful chicken broth is just gone.
Now that you're saying that, I actually think my mom used to put it, the electric one, not the electric one, the stovetop one. I think she used to put it under running cold water. Maybe.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. The old school version.
I've seen that. I wouldn't do that with the electric one, but.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, and I just wanted to say for those who didn't get to answer your question, if we didn't get to your question, you can DM me anytime on Instagram. I'm at Edible Living. Aran's Instagram is at Cannelle Vanille. And we're so happy you came.
It's one, Jenny says, your oatmeal and yogurt pancakes are so delicious from the Newlywed Cookbook.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Yes, that's a classic that keeps coming back, and I'm so happy about that.
Hey, Sarah and Aran, how are you guys doing?
Great, thank you.
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was a really insightful discussion, and I'm more excited, than ever to dive into warm, hearty meals this winter with my Instant Pot. We're just so grateful that both of you were able to join us tonight, and thank you to all of our attendees for logging in and joining us for an hour tonight. This book, Instant Family Meals, will be available on our website, booklarder.com. So head over there if you'd like to purchase a copy. There is a link to the book in the chat function if you'd like to click on that and check it out. And then this talk actually will also be on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. So if you know someone that couldn't make it tonight, or who might find this chat insightful, just check out our YouTube channel and we will have those all posted up for you.
You didn't tell us that before.
Yeah, it will be in the YouTube channel. And then we will also send a follow-up email to everyone who attended and absentees tonight. So everyone will get a link. But that's all that we have prepared for you tonight. Thank you again, Sarah and Aran, for chatting with us, and I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks for having us.
I'm
Erin,
gonna
thank
be
you for
making
being
the
here. And that was it's always such a treat to talk to you.
It's just a treat to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.